So think about this. It all started with just a handful of followers in a tiny, remote corner of the Roman Empire. And now, fast forward 2,000 years, and it's literally the largest religion on the entire planet. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace that incredible journey of Christianity from a small, local sect to a truly global faith.
Just to put that in perspective, right now we're talking about more than 2 billion people. That's about a third of the entire world's population. It's a staggering number.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How did this happen? How did a faith that really started on the fringes, on the margins of society, become this powerhouse that shapes so much of world history? Well, it's a story filled with dramatic reversals, some absolutely crucial decisions, and a whole lot of constant reinvention.
And if you really want to understand Christianity, you've got to start with its central figure. See, unlike a lot of other faiths that might focus on a philosophy or a set of laws, Christianity is, it's fundamentally built around the life and teachings of one person, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to start at the very core of this story with that single person and a really powerful promise way back in a corner of the Roman Empire during the 1st century.
The very first Christians, they were all Jewish. For them, Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah, the one they'd been reading about in the Hebrew Scriptures. The core belief was that his death and resurrection, that was a victory over death itself. And they were just eagerly waiting for him to come back. So at its heart, this was really a movement within Judaism.
But, for this movement to become more than just a ripple in the Jewish world, its followers had to figure something out. They had to settle a really critical debate. And the decision they made? It would literally set the course for the next 2,000 years.
And the person right at the center of that whole debate was a guy named Paul of Tarsus. Now, he was a devout Jew who, believe it or not, at first persecuted Christians. But then he has this dramatic conversion experience and he becomes the faith's most influential early missionary. He's the one who really acts as a bridge between the Jewish world and the non-Jewish or Gentile world.
Okay, so this really lays out the core conflict. On one side, you had the early Jewish Christians. They believed that for a non-Jew, a Gentile, to follow Jesus, they had to convert to Judaism first. Accept all the laws, the whole package. But Paul, he argued passionately against this. He insisted that faith in Jesus and that alone was enough.
And in the end, Paul's position won out. This was the moment. This is when Christianity really starts to transform from a Jewish sect into its own distinct religion, one that was open to people from any culture, any ethnic background. The floodgates were just wide open for expansion.
So that one decision created this massive wave of expansion across the whole empire. And the next few centuries, they would see the faith go from this small, persecuted minority to the absolute heart of imperial power.
And wow, what a reversal it was. I mean, think about it. In 64 CE, you've got Emperor Nero blaming Christians for the Great Fire of Rome, leading to just horrific persecution. But then, less than 300 years later, Emperor Constantine himself converts, and all that persecution stops. And by 392, it's the official state religion. That's an absolutely astonishing turn of events.
But as you might guess, with all that growth and power came new problems, new conflicts. You had these growing cultural and political divides between the Latin-speaking West and the Greek-speaking East. Mix in some big disagreements over theology and, crucially, the authority of the Pope in Rome, and eventually it all led to the Great Schism in 1054. This was the first really big split, the first major fracture that divided the Church into the Roman Catholic West and the Eastern Orthodox East. Now that East-West divide, it would define Christianity for centuries. But there was another split coming, an even more explosive one, just on the horizon. And this one was going to reshape the religious and political map of Europe forever.
And that fracture, of course, was the Protestant Reformation. It was sparked back in the 1500s by a German monk named Martin Luther, who stood up and challenged the authority and practices of the incredibly powerful medieval Roman Catholic Church.
And this whole thing was fueled by new technology, the printing press, and rising nationalism. But at its core, the Reformation was a battle over one single, powerful question. Who has the final say when it comes to faith? For the Catholic Church, the answer was the Pope and Church tradition. But for reformers like Luther, the final authority rested in one place and one place only, the Bible itself.
So this theological revolution, it didn't just reform the church, it completely shattered its unity, and that created a third major branch, Protestantism. This just unleashed a huge wave of new denominations, the Lutherans, the Calvinists, the Anglicans, and it forever changed the face of Christianity.
Okay, so after centuries of global expansion, which was often tied to European colonialism, we're going to jump way forward. We're talking about the last 100 years or so, because it's here that we see the most profound demographic shift in the religion's entire history. The whole center of gravity of the story is about to move.
Just consider this incredible shift for a second. At the start of the 1900s, 80% of all Christians lived in Europe and North America. But then, over the next 100 years, look at the staggering growth in a place like Africa. It goes from just 9 million believers to over 335 million. That's just explosive.
So by the year 2000, the whole picture had completely flipped on its head. The typical Christian was no longer a European. More likely, they were from Africa, Asia, or Latin America. The faith's heartland had decisively moved to the global south.
And a huge engine driving this modern growth has been Pentecostalism. Now, this is a movement that only started back in 1906. It really emphasizes personal experience, miracles, and the Holy Spirit. And it just found really fertile ground in cultures with a strong sense of the spiritual world. Today, it has over 500 million followers worldwide. Just incredible growth.
So what you see is this really fascinating contrast. While church attendance is plummeting in the historic Christian centers like, say, England, it's absolutely booming in places like Nigeria. And get this, in a complete reversal of history, missionaries are now being sent from countries like Korea and Brazil to Europe to evangelize.
And that leaves us with the final, pretty provocative thought. After 2,000 years of constant change and reinvention, Christianity is transforming once again. So as its energy and its growth moves so decisively south and east, away from all its historic centers, you have to wonder, what will the next chapter of this incredible story actually look like?